Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon your time zone. I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times, and I'd like to welcome you today to our session, Build versus Buy for Data Quality, Insight for a Data Steward. All right, before we get started, a couple of brief announcements. There'll be a live Q&A right after the presentation. So, go over the control panel, look for the questions window, type it in, hit submit, and we'll answer as many as time allows. Secondly, this program will be available on demand within the next 24 hours or so on the sdtimes.com website, so you can play it over and over again to your heart's content. All right, getting into the topic, we know that data is complex. There are abbreviations put in fields, non-English words, company names entered into the name field, all kinds of parsing problems when domain values are blank. Anyway, hand-coded rules introduce problems to the data steward and require extensive debugging. So the question is, should you build your own data quality solution or buy one from a third party? We're about to find out. Here to discuss the pros and cons of each approach is Bud Walker. Bud is Vice President of Enterprise Sales and Strategy at Melissa Data. He's responsible for managing strategy, expansion, and vision for the company's offerings. After more than a decade as the Product Development Manager for Melissa Data's APIs and web services, he now heads up management in all worldwide markets. So now let's turn it over to Bud.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm Bud Walker. I've been with Melissa Data for many, many years, since 2002. And I was actually primarily responsible for sales engineering around the product line. And I got to hear firsthand the struggles that these organizations go through when they are looking to acquire tools and when they're in discussions, internal discussions on how to. So leveraging that, I'd like to bring some of the observations that that have come to me over the years and kind of relay them to you. So first, let's do a little bit of background on who we are, just for those of you who are new. Melissa Data has been around since 1985 again, with 170 employees. We're in 5 countries, consisting of programmers and different kinds of analysts, DQ consultants. We have data scientists, technical support, and marketing and sales. Now, what's interesting about us is the clientele is really diverse. Often I get asked, who are your customers? And really, there is just such a diversity in the verticals that and industries that are represented in our customer base. And partly because really anyone who's got customers is a target for us. And you'll see a lot of colleges and universities. We're dealing a lot with government, both at the county, at the city, and at the state level, and even the federal level. And actually now internationally. Also working in a lot of with real estate and obviously food and retail, anywhere where loyalty, gaming, automotive, anywhere where customer retention and customer validation is a requirement. Let's move on. So here's just some of our brand names that are good customers of ours. So when we talk about data quality, we talk about data. And we understand that there are domains of data. So these domains of data are typically cover the whole universe of anything that a customer or a company or would have. So we talk about customer data, product data, location data, finance, sensor, scientific, employee. All these are what we call the common domains of data, or the domains of data. And many organizations are not just looking for data quality for one domain. They're actually looking for domain knowledge and data quality for other domains, such as location and products. And obviously, there are strengths and weaknesses to certain vendor offerings across the domains, and that kind of factors into buying decisions. So let's define what is data quality. The way I see it, data quality is an assessment of the data's fitness for use. So how good, how reliable can we actually leverage and utilize our data? How well are we doing that? And the data can be any kind of data. DQ is a very generic term. But data quality is a state. And I think of it as a utopian state of DQ, where the data can be measured and monitored. It could be as simple as an address field, or it can be every column in your whole database, or in every data set in the database. And DQ is also a state where it can be trusted. I think the key word in DQ is trust. So what can I do with my assets? Do I trust the insight that I'm getting out of my data? Are my operations going the way I expect them to? Trust is a key word in all DQ considerations. And DQ meets what the DAMA calls the 6 dimensions. So DAMA is an organization around data management, and I go to a lot of their conferences and so on, but they measure data in these 6 dimensions. So roughly, the data quality dimensions are around completeness. So is the data complete? Are the values missing? Are they unusable? Do we have everything we're supposed to get in that particular data field? Is the data valid? So is the data are we getting the values that conform to a specified format? So for example, we get a lot into address accuracy here. So address validity. Is the address valid? Is the telephone number valid? Is the social security number valid? I mean, we can go across each and every field and check for its validity. Consistency. That's another big dimension, or another important dimension. So consistency is, does the data align with preconceived patterns? Are we expecting what we get? Are the birth dates all the same direction? Are they month, date, year? Are they the appropriate way in Europe? Are currencies properly represented by location? So on. Consistency is a very important thing. We'll get into a couple of examples. Accuracy. How well does the data reflect the real thing? And this is really important, because you can have lots of data logically represented in a database, but if it doesn't have a real-world correlation, if your address is a fake address or if it's just been put in by someone, that doesn't do you any good. Uniqueness. So lots of companies will have lots of data, but there are lots of duplication in there, and the data objects are unnecessary. And then timeliness. How stale is the data? How up to date is it? What are the impacts of having data as it moves through time? So these 6 ways of measuring data are what we call DQ dimensions. And now, when you're talking about a data quality program, we're talking typically about a life cycle or strategy. And the very first thing that we advise, and that many customers or our companies going through this evolution of a data strategy will do, is they'll start with a data assessment of the data. So a profiling of the data. And that means measure and analyze. So you run statistical metrics across a whole bunch of columns. You understand the data at the table level. You're able to look for things like what we talked about in the 6 dimensions around completeness and patterns and all this great information. But then as the data is measured, what do you do about the things? How do you move it along? And that is, you are going to need to get into parsing rules, standardization rules, correction rules. And then once the data has been through that phase, the data cleansing phase, you can then enhance it, because now it's accurate, it's standardized, it can be related to additional data sets that are outside maybe the organization's silo of data, and then it can be moved on to deduplicate, consolidate, and then set up monitoring rules. So really, data, it's not just a one-time approach where you roll out a DQ program and you're done. It really is a life cycle, and it's something that you reevaluate continuously. So there's lots of sources of bad data. We all know you can put it in on web forums, and you can, there's lots of traditional sources of bad data. People miskey, mistype, and misspell all the time. And then obviously those are entry quality problems. Process quality is really, you know, did something in the system mess it up? Did it go through an error last night where something crashed, and then the file that was supposed to be brought in or loaded into the system was corrupt in some way? So that is process quality issues. And then ID quality issues are what we talked about around duplication. Are there similar objects identified? Did somebody in sales put in a customer, but somebody in marketing had already put them in? These are ID quality issues. Integration quality issues are really about quality of completeness. So these occur because the information is isolated by system or departmental boundaries. Usage quality is the information used and interpreted correctly. And this really relates to subject matter expertise in the company. Sometimes people move on, sometimes the data is being used in a way, but no one that's currently being tasked with reporting on the data understands all of the data, and some of the data is not tended correctly. We just don't know the quality of how it's being used, for example. And then agent quality. These issues obviously are important, and they relate back to our timeliness dimension. So as enough time passed, that the validity of the information can no longer be trusted. And then organizational quality. This is a high level, schema level construct of all the data, and how is it being managed in between different disparate systems. But these are kind of a cool way. This actually comes from a real nice blog post that we have on our website with all the appropriate explanations. So this is really cool. This is actually brand new. This is a study done by a Harvard Business Review using an IBM number. And for many, many years, we've been quoting these DQ numbers, but this is a 2016 number that the annual cost of bad data has hit $3 trillion. That's annual. So lost business opportunities, all kinds of problems, costs. There's really just, this is a staggering number. So the entire U.S. national debt is only 19.97 trillion. So that's 15% of the national debt on an annual basis is cost in bad data. So it's a huge problem. Now, data problems are really like in different ways. There's single source problems, which are at the schema level. Lack of integrity constraints are problems, or poor schema design, or at the instance level with data entry errors, misspellings, redundancy, duplicates, contradictory values. And then you have things like multi-source problems, which actually relate to all the data entities or different data entities. I'll show you some examples here in a minute. So naming and structural conflicts, inconsistent aggregation and timing. So here's some examples of a single source schema problem. So you look and see there's attribute level issues, birth date, it's outside the range, right? There's no 1330. or a record violation, which is age 22, but the birth date is at 12/02 of 1970. So obviously, this is a rule problem. Record type, uniqueness violations are a problem. So you've got John and Peter both sharing the same social security number. And then referential integrity, where John Smith is in Department 127, which doesn't exist. This is kind of stuff we see all the time. And then when we get into other kinds of problems, missing values, oftentimes you'll see missing values, nulls, or just a default value or a blank. So for that phone number 9999, that was just the default value that was keyed in by the system. We've got record level problems, transposition issues, and wrong references. So we see this a lot. This is just some of the examples. I don't want to beat them all into the ground, but just to kind of give you some idea. And then multi-source problems are when you're talking about the linkages or the relations between two different tables. Here you've got a client table and a customer table, and potentially you've got a duplicate in Kristen Smith versus Chris L. Smith. We're using different gender codes in there. It's not unified in any way, and there's just multiple inconsistencies with the way the names are split out. You'll see this a lot where the CID and the customer number are kind of on similar pattern. They're not joined together in any way. So these are multi-source problems. These are more at the schema level. But just in our day-to-day, we see lots of problems. Data standardization issues, casing issues. Obviously, there aren't so much as a data quality thing as a kind of the appearance of data. Address composition issues. This is a huge problem, and it actually leads to a lot of duplication of records because street versus road may not be apparent if you haven't done the address standardization, that it's a duplicate. Obviously, things like phone formatting, not huge. But as we push out internationally, we're really seeing a lot of international data issues are paramount, even for companies that are expanding overseas or companies in country. We're really dealing with lots of different issues with transliteration and scripts and different kinds of things. So these are major issues around that we see. So one of the two kind of breakouts that we kind of define DQ as, we have an active data quality concept and a passive data quality concept. What I like to think of as active data quality is that kind of correlation to the real world of data, something that's constantly moving outside of the organization. And things like addresses and phone numbers and emails and names and people. And, did the person pass on? Are they married? Are the names changed? Did they move to a different company? Business still open? These are things that are typically outside of a control or typically outside of the knowledge of an organization unless the customer calls them up or somebody does and says, hey, stop sending the bill or something. So there's a lot of, this is kind of where you demarcate between what could possibly be done in-house and what you kind of want to take a look at as far as external vendors, the active data quality. And then obviously we know the benefits of clean data are obviously that once it's standardized, once it's clean, once it's geolocated, once you've got the formatting all done correctly, it's very easy to blend that data with demographics and psychographics and firmographics to really enhance analytics and business drivers, decision making. And then obviously you get these certifications of compliance and these certificates. So for example, in the US, we have a CAS report, we have in UK, we have a Royal Mail PAF report. These tell us that the data is like accurate. So data can be trusted. That's very important when you're making any kind of decisions or driving this data into a warehouse where you're going to be slicing and dicing to get some insight. And then being able to merge across deduping efforts and golden record allows us to really understand the customer, all the interactions with the customer in one company. So that's a benefit of clean data and a good strategy. And then obviously marketing, reputation, and cost savings are huge as far as the benefit of clean data. Compliance, satisfaction, the less time spent is savings earned by the company, and yeah, cost savings is huge. So typically, when we're when we get a customer come to us or a prospect come to us and start talking about their data, there's usually some driver that's it's kind of forcing their hand. It's driving them in one direction. Look, we need to get this done yesterday. We've got a new compliance. We've got a fintech financial compliance initiative that has to be done by March. We are dealing with the HIPAA healthcare companies, healthcare regulations. We need to get this data strategy put in place by a certain date. But otherwise, we see a lot around international expansion, mergers and acquisitions. These are kind of triggers to know that you really need to get serious about a data quality strategy and a program. Or if you're just losing a lot of money in mail and shipping. So, and then organizations typically are at different maturity levels to how they understand their data issues and how willing they are to kind of engage the conversation with the vendors on implementing DQ tools, or even themselves. Is there a data governance practice established in the company? Are there the right reporting being done? Do they understand their data very well? And this maturity model is actually really accurate, because you'll see people that come in at the higher levels and they know exactly what they want. And you'll see people maybe at the marginal or stable levels that have done maybe one DQ implementation, and they're looking to maybe bring on more, looking to shop around and see what they can get from different vendors, or gain experience as to how they could better leverage their existing investments. So ideally, every organization is moving up this ladder through marginal, stable, best practice into transformational. There are very few companies at the transformational stage, which are actively managing all their data. They have a full governance program. They understand all the assets. They leverage it on all new orchestration of new products or new migrations to new technology. But typically, we're discussing a lot with marginal and stable companies who are looking to shop for the first time, or embark upon a data strategy for the first time. So some of the major considerations that that have come to me over the years have been the cost to build and maintain a commercial solution. Obviously, is a huge one. So how long would it take us to develop a full-on DQ strategy versus to go and buy something off the shelf? That's a very important business consideration. And the time to do that, the time to business benefit. Measuring the quality and accuracy of a homegrown solution versus a refined and tested solution. This is a key consideration, because most DQ companies are getting input from hundreds of customers over many years, and are constantly refining the solutions that they produce. Whereas a homegrown solution tends to be kind of done to solve a particular issue at a particular time. And that may work. We'll talk about that in a bit. But just because you can build it, some people do have large development teams, doesn't mean that you should. Meaning, time-wise, are you really reinventing the wheel? and we see that happen. And is it a problem that has been solved many times already, or is it unique to you? So these are the things that the data governance and data stewards need to, data governance people and the data stewards need to consider before embarking on any kind of build versus buy equation. So preparation for DQ tools, typically we'll see companies, organizations will create a stewardship team. That's kind of step one. Analyze and assess, profile the organization's data, and create some kind of idea of what they're going to do. So they start creating a master repository of everything. They migrate it maybe into a warehouse of some kind, or they start to literally create spreadsheets where they're going column by column and they're trying to identify the data and its purpose and where it comes from and all the governance around that particular data. And then they start to look at what level of problems they have. Is it at the schema level or is it the instance level? And then maybe define some workflows, mapping rules, and stuff like that where they're looking to drive down a little bit. And then that's where they arrive at the conclusion, hey, let's go shopping. So this is kind of the preparatory phase prior to shopping or building. So the do-it-yourself build approach, so it's kind of following along those same lines where you engage a deep dive analysis of the data assets and catalog everything. And then start developing small wins. So this is what we see companies will do, and what we recommend is that they solve one problem at a time, where they're might be assessing all the data, but they're actually doing a small phase, very focused on a problem or two or three, so they can start showing and getting buy-in from management. If you start off too large, you are too ambitious about it, it's very hard to show that what you're building is actually making sense and that it's time well spent. So it's very important, I think, to kind of do iteratively small wins and obviously rinse and repeat. And then going through if you've got some type of UI or if you've got some training that needs to be done to accompany that, these are kind of the considerations around the build approach. So what we see is companies sometimes bite off a little more than they can chew, and they actually run into these pitfalls. So oftentimes we'll have a very clever developer, and they'll come in and they'll be like, "No, I'll do the fuzzy matching myself," or I need phone verification and address verification, but the fuzzy matching is just comparing two strings, so I'm going to do that, and we'll save a lot of costs. But what they don't realize is that the more that you dig deep, the more that you realize the complexity here, and things like if you're matching cities, let's say Los Angeles and Hollywood are really the same city, but one's a vanity for the other. So we can give you lots of examples where this may not be a good idea to go about and produce a fuzzy match of your own for really very little gain. Or we'll get sometimes I can write my own address validation engine. We see this a lot. Oh, I'll just get the USPS data set, or I'll get the Canada Post data set. I'll write my own rules. And I can tell you, personal experience firsthand, this is an extremely hard thing to do. Well, I think we've been working on our engine for 20 years, and it's still every month we're still addressing things. We're still adding new rules, so it's a very difficult thing. People want to get lists of company names or ways to standardize. Can you give me all the suffixes on a company name? Can you give me all the I want to know all the honorifics for a person, things like that. But really, when you start to reinvent the wheel here, you're really wasting time. And I think the organization's goals are to develop a competent data strategy, and that should be the focus Or, hey, we're about to expand internationally. I know somebody that knows German, so we should be good. I've heard that before. And then it keeps going. I mean, we've got, so people want to standardize names often. They want to build address parsers so they can split out the components of an address, or handle business rules around multiple people living at the home, which is something we call householding, or handle things like divorces and marriages and so on. And some of this needs to be done at the data stewardship level, at the build level, but others can be handled by using the right vendor tools to kind of get the answers and then plug them in. And some of the common pitfalls we find out is, hey, we came in, 6 months ago into this program, and now we're late. The budget is already stretched. It's difficult to meet the changing needs of our users. It's not meeting user acceptance testing. It's typically brittle because it doesn't now work with the new system they just rolled out. It's very focused on the exact data model that the organization has, and it's usually too technical. So I think these are some of the issues we see when too much is emphasized as far as build your own. But also there are pitfalls when you buy the solution, and we see that as well, or when you buy DQ vendor products without understanding the needs of the organization completely. So we see companies that overbuy, meaning they buy when they're not ready to adopt the DQ tools yet. So they'll literally go through a whole year of sitting on it and then come back and go, we didn't use the tool yet. Can you help us out and teach us how to use the tool? So we've seen that. Or they come in too late when the problems have already exacerbated to the point of losing money. That's a real big problem. Or buy a solution from a vendor on the cheap and kind of go through the problem where, now it doesn't scale to our needs. We have to completely take out what we bought and put another product in. So you kind of want to ask these questions up front. And then what we see a lot is one department will be much better along the data strategy and the data governance route, and they'll come in and get a tool, but they leave out the 3 other departments in their company that also need it. So for example, a lot of e-commerce requires very good entry of contact data. Otherwise, you don't really want to send a product to a client, but that may not be the same for their marketing efforts or in sales or other places in the division. So we really recommend that you research the vendors. Does the vendor have referenceable customers? Are there case studies that apply to your industry that you can read? Does the vendor offer one stop for more than one domain of DQ? You kind of want to get into that. If you're a manufacturer, that's probably the question you want to ask. Hey, are there product information management tools? Is that something I need? And then one of the things that's really cool is that nowadays you can, both on the Gartner peer review and G2 Crowd and others, Tech Target, you can read peer reviews by data stewards in the industry who are actually, hey, I'm trying this tool from Melissa Data. This is what I found. These are a real good way to research the vendors. And then are there any security or compliance certifications? These are important. So these are general questions to ask. How old is the reference data? What sources do you use for your data? What data standards do you abide by? How do you resolve duplicates? What data domains do you specialize in? How will the solution be delivered? Is it customizable? That's a very important key thing. How scalable and permanent performance is the solution? So, and then kind of our synopsis, our summary here, the build versus buy. In our view, DQ outcomes are best taken using a hybrid approach. So I really like the tactical approach. Build and buy tactically. You're You're going to, everything that's involved around active data quality is much better off the shelf, much better suited to an off the shelf kind of a vendor product. Anything that's passive or deals with the organization's internal data can be better managed internally, and maybe you leverage generalized cleansing and different types of parsing engines to assist in that. But it's really a custom kind of a rule build approach. So this, the rule of thumb is to buy where external reference data is involved. You typically want to go out and buy that. That's like anything to do with the verification of information. And build where internal knowledge, subject matter knowledge is necessary. But I think what's important is that you reevaluate your options every year, or even on a shorter time frame, and make sure that the criteria is still being met, and the vendor did not produce something that will shortcut or make things easier for you in the future, or did other vendors also do that same thing. So it needs to be an ongoing conversation that you're constantly kind of looking at and determining where things can get easier. So build and buy a hybrid approach is where we kind of this is our closing statement here. Leverage cleansing and validation tools. Buy where the vendor has powerful parsing. Buy customer matching. It's very difficult to do customer matching. I give you 100 examples of where homegrown solutions people wasted a lot of time and ended up with not very much matching at all. The whole golden record survivorship, which is the consolidation of duplicates after the identification of them, is a difficult process. That's typically something you buy. Whereas developing DQ rules, one thing that's interesting about Melissa data is we like to build out APIs, which are really modular, and they allow you to kind of plug the solution right into the problem without having some giant monolithic solution with a bunch of features that you may not use. So, and they allow a lot of customization, so you kind of get that hybrid approach where you're getting a good tool, but you're able to customize it. And then obviously, knowledge-based tools make it a lot easier. So I think that was a long-winded, hopefully a clear presentation. Please, if you have any questions for me, I'm anxious to hear them.
But that was an excellent presentation. You're talking about problems that every company that I know faces. I mean, people putting the wrong name in the wrong field and all these other issues that you addressed. But a couple of things you mentioned, and again, I too would remind people, if you have any questions, please type them into the control panel and submit them, and we'll get to them, as time allows. A couple of things, though. One of the things you mentioned is that this bad data is costing people $3 trillion. Like, how do they put a dollar value on bad data? How do they come up with that? Do you know?
I think IBM obviously has a deep integration with large companies all across the world, right. But just in the U.S., I would assume that their data quality tools, they do have some, and their integration tools and their consulting practice, which is fairly large, is actually, they've got their hands in a lot of customer kind of integrations around large-scale rollouts. So statistically, by them being able to assess like the dollar amount of these organizations, I think is the general way that they produce this number. It is staggering, but it's absolutely, yeah.
Interesting. So the other thing I wanted to ask you was, and we certainly see this in our business, I'm sure other people do, people filling out a form and they put in, first name Mickey, last name Mouse, or, Acme Corporation for the company name. Is there any way to screen those out if the fields are entered correctly? Is there any tool that can pick up and say, oh, this is a fake name or this is a fake company, or is that something that you actually have to dive into the abyss and dredge out yourself?
Oh no, absolutely. So yeah, we're very hard at work at identity products. So Melissa Data, from the name parsing and the name validation engine, would immediately understand that Mickey Mouse is kind of a suspicious name. But going beyond that, we would be able to assume that we would be able to verify that the name and the address didn't match together. So that would give you another level of verification that that there's some potential fraud here. But there's lots of knowledge here, lots of suspicious words, vulgar words, all these kinds of things are built into a good DQ engine. So that would be a very easy case for us to identify, either at the point of entry or at the back end, that something's wrong with that record.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's very useful function. All right, so we have one question that we have time for from our audience. And this person says, at my company, we often talk about buying off-the-shelf data quality tools to solve some of the challenges that we have, but we have a hard time convincing upper management of the value of this strategy. Do you have any tips for making the case easier?
Oh, great. Good question. Actually, there are whole roundtables dedicated at these DAMA conferences where I've heard organizations literally where there'll be a representative of the organization stand up and literally tell the crowd, I cannot get management buy-in. It's a very difficult thing in some organizations to want to have the organizational will to go out and start a data strategy and just spend the money potentially for a whole new governance program. But what I've noticed is a really powerful way to kind of is going back to that original in my presentation where I was talking about small wins. There's nothing better than being able to complete from the moment that you start to the end a very small project that actually shows that, hey, what I did was able to uplift the data significantly, and here's a report both before and after of what we were able to move the needle on in terms of a DQ problem solved. And I think that more than anything is a really really quick way to kind of get a little more action, an executive to kind of sign up for that, for maybe doing that again or more often. Another thing to do, potentially we see organizations do is they'll reach out to a vendor and do a POC. So they'll take a proof of concept around some data that they've got, put a non-disclosure agreement with that vendor and go, give me your best report on what you can do to uplift this data. How could we correct this data? How could we standardize it? How can we dedupe it? How can we go through some of the disciplines that you do and showcase that to management? So a very comprehensive report also goes a long way to winning over stakeholders and business leaders.
Okay.
So yeah.
Was an excellent answer. So are evaluation copies of the software available, and what would be the fee to license?
So yeah, so really modular. So depending on what DQ capabilities you're looking to implement, there are free trials available. Melissa Data offers absolutely no risk free trial for all of our tools. We also schedule consulting time with a data quality analyst to help you understand how to implement the tool and leverage it to its best ability. And then, yeah, the pricing really is dependent on the volume of records in an organization. It's really based on how large or how small the organization is. And some things have a fixed price because things like profiling and matching are pretty inexpensive, but they're not based on volumes. So really, if we remember our data quality life cycle, if we pick and choose from the different facets of that wheel and we produce and you want to implement a product from there, there's going to be different price points depending on what you're implementing. But our motto is, for many, many years, our motto was that data quality should cost you more than it saves you. So we believe so much in that we've had a return on investment guarantee for I believe for the last 7 years, that we believe that our products will actually save you more money than they cost you.
Excellent. All right, Bud. So it looks like we're getting right up against time. So I'll give you 30 seconds for a final thought, a final takeaway for our attendees, and then we'll wrap up.
So yeah, obviously, when it comes to the schema level data quality, any organization, all organizations need to really understand what legacy applications, where their data is coming from, take a look across all the potential possible places where it could break, and assess the state of data quality that they currently have. And I think a really good first step is to actually get a data profiling engine from Melissa Data and just do a scan of all your data. And that could be done absolutely risk-free, no charge at all, and kind of get an understanding of what we're looking at, to kind of convince business stakeholders or to just start upon this program. So data profiling is something that I advocate everybody to kind of take a look at, ask us for, and we can actually send out to everybody how to get started with a good strategy around it.
That's great. You know, I just saw one last question come in, and I think it's an important one, so I'm going to slip it in right now and ask this. So was this, I know people like to protect their data, they want it behind their firewall. So is your solution an on-premise solution, or can it be used in the cloud, or how would that work in terms of the data security that people want?
So because we deal with organizations all across different verticals, and some are very, very secure environments, we produce a solution that's both on-premise or completely in the cloud, depending on the customer's kind of choice. So we can install everything that's necessary on-premise, or go completely in the cloud and have a cloud-based approach through a web service API, or even through some online SaaS type products. So very, very flexible.
All right, that's great. Okay, so Bud, I want to thank you for a great presentation today. As I said, this certainly is a problem that I imagine exists in every organization, and your solutions are absolutely address those issues. So thank you so much for your time today. I'd also like to thank Melissa Data for sponsoring today's event, and to remind everybody that this presentation will be available in the next day or so on the sdtimes.com website, that you can play it over and over again. And on behalf of SD Times, I'm Dave Rubenstein. Thanks for attending, everybody, and so long until next time.